now. I'm going to give another minute or so before we call the meeting to order, because I think we have 7 and a couple of people are trying to call in about a minute. Good evening, everyone. First thing on the agenda is the approval of prior minutes. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes? Okay, motion by Brett, second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, we'll do the roll call. We'll start with Paul.
Yes.
Tom? 2, Jack?
Yes.
3, Sharon?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Larry? Yes. And I believe that's 7 of us. I don't see anybody else.
Larry,
joining.
I'm here. Yes.
Okay.
And Brian's on.
Hi, Larry.
Brian, are you going to vote yes for the minutes?
Yep.
Okay, so Brian's yes. And who came on before Brian? I'm sorry.
It's
Dan.
me, Larry. It's Dan.
Dan. Yep.
Oh, Dan. Okay, good. So we have 9, 9, 0, 0. Okay. First on the agenda is Chris Gallagher. Chris, are you on?
I'm on, Larry.
Okay, all yours, Chris. I believe you said you can defer item 8 to George.
Yeah, I can touch on it quick, and then if there's any detailed questions, George can pick up the
Sounds
details.
good. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
So in 2019, 2 years ago, the water department was approved for an $11 million bond item. The wording in that bond, the way that it was written, left the piece out. So this is a housekeeping item to clarify the language of how it should have been written 2 years ago. And this allows us to use any premium received upon the sale of the bond to actually pay down the premium. So it's really just a housekeeping item from 2 years ago.
Hey, Chris, I only asked because this is my item at the town meeting. Were there any implications to the fact that we didn't have it in there for 2 years?
George says no. I'm trying to unmute.
That's all right, George. You're shaking your head. It's good.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I couldn't figure out which thing to unmute the thing with. The point is that in order to be able to use the premium, this type of wording was in there. Now, when the school did it, they copied something direct. Whoever put it in at the time left it out. So we want to use the premium. Unfortunately, we're not right up against it to this moment to help pay down the borrowing and everything. So, but so if we add this, we're kind of just going back and correcting it so that we can use that
Okay.
money.
Thank you.
All right.
So Chris, this is really a technical correction.
Correct.
Okay. Any further questions for Chris? Okay, Chris, I believe you're good with Article 8. So let's move on to 18.
Sure.
Article 18.
So Article 18 and 19 really go hand in hand. back in 2013, 2014, the water department built a new treatment plant down off of Oak Street on Lamson Road. As part of that project, there was the Mass Endangered Species Act came into effect, where there's a butterfly down there that falls under their jurisdiction. So there are these indigo plants that were in the way of where the new treatment plant was going to go. The department at that time transplanted over 200 of these indigo plants to the open field that's over closer towards Gavin's Pond. At the time, we were also supposed to, and we're supposed to transfer that land into a conservation restriction. So we're able to do that internally within the town by taking those two parcels, one of which is in the town of Foxborough's name, and the other is in the town of Foxborough Water Department's name, and transfer those parcels to the Conservation Commission. That'll meet our requirement with Mass Endangered Species, and will close out the original permit from 2013 and allow us to continue to operate down there without penalty from that organization. So Article 18 is for the parcel. It's a plus or minus 30 acre parcel, map 47, parcel 87. And that one in its entirety will go from the town of Foxborough to the town of Foxborough Conservation Commission. So that's Article 18.
Any questions for Chris?
Chris, will it incur any cost for the town? Is Conservation Commission gonna have to pick up any maintenance or anything like that?
The water department will continue to maintain the property. So that butterfly habitat, which I'm told is the only one in the state, the water department will continue to maintain that. The big thing is to make sure those indigo plants are alive and well. There's some large pine trees that we're going to do some cutting of that really hinder the growth of those plants. So we're going to do some land clearing down there in order to let those indigo plants thrive. But that'll stay with the water department.
Okay.
Chris, I have a question as to the location. There's two parcels here that total 30 some odd acres. And and it's described as Oak Street, but in reality, it sounds like it's all backland. It's north of the treatment plant. Is that correct?
Yes. So
Towards Sharon.
yeah. So if you the piece that's the town of Foxborough property runs from Oak Street, goes towards Sharon, abutting the Atherton Road properties, runs all the way out, if you know where to the Sharon town line, just short of Gavin's Pond Road.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a 30 acre parcel. That's the bigger piece that's getting transferred. And then the other piece, we're actually subdividing the other parcel. So the other Article 19 is the piece that's in the water department's name, and that's map 48, parcel 9. That in its entirety is almost a 62 acre parcel. We're gonna split that off, so there'll be a parcel A, which will be 4.1 acres, and that will encompass, along with the other parcel, the butterfly habitat.
So the resulting parcel fronts on Oak Street from Lamson Road north for several hundred yards. Is that
Correct? Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So those are the two parcels. I'm working with planning board to split the water department parcel. There's an A&R plan and process that goes through the planning board to actually split that parcel. And at the end of the day, it's going to stay as is. They'll go to Conservation Commission's name. The town of Foxborough Water Department will continue to maintain the habitat area for the butterflies. And that's about it.
Chris, I'm not familiar with this. It's quite interesting. Is this a butterfly habitat, an official park, open to the public, or, what's its designation?
So as it stands right now, the piece that falls into the water department is really protected under the DEP's requirement in our zone 1 and zone 2 restrictions. Really the zone 1 around the wells. But once they transfer to conservation, it's available to walk. You can actually come in from the top of Lamson Road. There's actually a path in the cul-de-sac from Austin Lane. And then if anybody knows where the soccer fields are over on the Sharon side, off of Gavin's Pond Road, you can actually come in the backside as well and walk along the edge of Gavin's Pond Road and get to this area.
I actually walked that area this weekend, and someone put signs up all over the place, save the frosted elephant. So it's definitely a topic in Sharon that they're working on.
We have 1 or 2 residents that are very interested in the property out there and actually have done a lot of cutting of brush on their own. And then the water department staff will go out there with a smaller truck and load up and get rid of some of the brush.
Chris, did you say that people can't go there until the land is actually transferred?
No, they can go there now. The big thing for the water department is to make sure people are staying away from the wells and the treatment plant itself. The treatment plant, that building is fenced off. The well buildings are not. Some of the construction that we're doing down there now, we will end up putting fences around the well buildings. And the big thing for people to realize is that that's, anything that hits the ground there eventually leaches down into the aquifer, which is where the wells are. So anything, the big thing for us is, and it's frustrating for the water department because it is signed, official, water department staff only, that people go walking with their dogs down there and they don't think twice about not picking up after them. So if I'm on a platform and I've got people watching, the biggest thing is that's your drinking water. So, and that's everybody, all 6,000 of 17,000 residents in Foxborough. That's, one of our resources for our drinking water. So, if you're down there, clean up after yourself. That's the biggest thing I can say, for everybody's benefit.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Article 18 or 19? No. Chris, I think you're good. Let's move on to Article 21.
There we go. So this is an annual article we have. This is for the sewer district revision. Doesn't always come up, but every so often, almost every year, we have somebody come up that's interested in getting into the sewer district in Foxborough. District was set up a number of years ago when Foxborough joined the sewer district with Mansfield and Norton. It was a way for the town to have input as to where the sewer ended up within the borders of Foxborough. So this particular property is 96 and 98 Mechanic Street. It's the Lantern Court Condo Association. It's directly across from the Ahern entrance on Mechanic Street. So there are 2 buildings. There are 14 units total on that property. They have come forward, 1 or 2 of the residents have come forward interested in connecting the property to sewer. They would be responsible if they decided to connect, to actually put all the pipe work in the ground. The closest connection is actually over in the Ahern parking lot. There's the Chestnut Townhomes Association off of Chestnut Street has a sewer lift station that they operate. The Ahern School is tied into. That's the closest connection point for them. So there's a couple people that have come forward in the association to take some of those steps, find out, information, what the closest connection point would be, how they could make that connection, what the costs are associated with it. They haven't moved forward with a formal application, but this would allow them to do so if the association chose to move forward and connect to sewer.
So Chris, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Chris a general question. So do properties need to be added to the sewer district before any applications can happen. So this would have to be the case for every resident who wants to get on the sewer.
So there is an area around the uptown area, around the common that is separated out as already being in the sewer district.
Okay.
And then, you know, what the town did, and this was just before I got here, I think it was 2013 was when they did this. They took all the properties that were already connected and they put them in the sewer district. There are some exceptions. If the sewer is available and somebody has a failed septic system, and the sewer is right there in front of their house, that's the desired connection point instead of them putting a new septic in the ground. So that's one way. It's an exception. The other things that we've seen come up are, you know, if it's a 40B property, again, we can't deny a 40B project. The state doesn't allow us. So, but everybody else, you have to get put into the sewer district before you move forward with a connection.
Okay, thank you.
So Chris, I take it we have plenty of capacity for the time being, to add properties to it.
We do. Yeah, we have a lot of capacity left in the system. We gained when the plant expansion was done, we gained 170,000 gallons a day. You know, the larger properties, you know, a 250 unit apartment building is going to use about 30 to 35,000 gallons a day.
Okay.
So we haven't touched that 170,000 yet. So there's a lot of capacity left in the system.
Chris, when a property joins like this and they have a number of units and existing septic systems, do you have to decommission it or do anything when the town's certify that it's kind of gone or removed, or does it just stick in the ground for however long?
No, that falls under the Board of Health. Anything Title V related, septic or cesspool related, falls under the Board of Health. So they would have to decommission that. They would pump any holding tanks out. They would have to crush it, then fill it with sand, and then bury it.
Okay, any further questions on Article 21? Chris, I think we're good.
All right.
Thank you for coming in. I'm sure the people, the owners of those articles, if they have any questions, they'll give you a call.
Definitely.
But we're good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
Paige is next, but I don't. Oh, yeah, she's on.
Hi.
But hi, Paige.
Hello.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Go
May
ahead,
I
Paige.
may I do my brief slideshow as an overview of
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Just because I have a lot of, detail. One of my bylaws is very long, and I'll
Yeah.
explain why, and then we can get into the Q&A after. So I'm going to.
So I did forward your presentation to everyone.
Okay, so I'll whip through it quickly for the viewing public.
Okay.
All right, let me see how to do the share screen. Getting good at this. Okay, now let me see if I can make this a slideshow. There we go. Does that look good for you guys?
Yes.
Okay, good. So Article 22, if you read it, is actually kind of something we have no choice on. This is the floodplain bylaw. It's meant to protect, life and limb from property damage and whatnot from flooding. The federal government is involved in this through FEMA, and they run the National Floodplain Insurance Program. The state of Massachusetts has agreed to work with FEMA to sort of act as the representative on FEMA's behalf in Massachusetts. And so the state of Massachusetts has come out with a mandatory model bylaw for us to pass. So this article would be basically replacing in its entirety the current floodplain bylaw with the model bylaw, slightly tailored for Foxborough. Like, we didn't have certain districts, so we were able to eliminate references to those districts. But generally speaking, this is a mandatory requirement, and all the language was given to us. If we don't choose to pass this bylaw, then the residents won't be eligible for the floodplain insurance program. So obviously that's a non-starter. And just, I added on this slide the name of the woman who was actually wonderful. I sent her our bylaw and she basically tweaked it for us, and I probably sent back about 10 or 15 times different iterations, because we vet this through a lot of departments, and she was wonderful. So this was all done through coordination with the state. So I'll get into Q&A after on this if anybody has any. Then the next article is 23. This is also sort of a housekeeping matter. We're basically seeking to replace the map showing the current Baker Street Historic District. I've worked with the Baker Street Historic District Commission on this, and they've signed off on this. What this is just merely correcting something that's wrong. The current map in the bylaw is a very poor quality, and this is an example of it right here. That's what it literally looks like on paper. It's just a photocopy, and the reference in the bylaw is to 1999, and yet the plan date is 2004. So we're never really sure how this all happened. With the current proposal in the new map, we haven't changed anything. The lines are exactly the same. It's just a much prettier picture. And we're making sure that the language of the bylaw matches the language of the map, so that there's no question that everything is very clear. So again, there's no change to the boundary, and the Historic District Commission has signed off on this. Article 24. Another correction. Gabby Jordan in my office, she's my fellow planner. She one day, a few months ago, noticed that in the bylaw, it listed currently, let me go down to this one. It shows the old version on the top there, that table shows what it used to say there. And then all of a sudden, Gabby was looking at the bylaw for some reason, and it jumped out at her that assisted living, nursing homes and whatnot had Ys next to them. And brought it to my attention immediately, and we started digging, and we haven't fully figured out what happened, and we all agreed it doesn't really matter at this point. I think the most important thing is to put the bylaw back to where it was. The reason being is, if you look at the Ys, that means yes, and that means in the use table, if anybody wanted to come in and put in a nursing home or an assisted living facility anywhere in town, in your neighborhood, basically, it would be a by right use. So this is not okay. We need to fix this right away. So that's the current proposal, is to put this back to special permit, which is what it always was prior to codification. And at some point, something changed in the bylaw, and we're not sure why. So this is to fix something that's wrong. And yeah, so to be clear, we're proposing going back to special permits for all districts, and then to an N, no, for S1. And we did relook at S1 and question why it said no, and came to the conclusion that it had to do with pretty much emergency services and having vulnerable populations up on the other side of Route 1 during game days or concerts. And I think generally speaking, it was just agreed that for right now, that's not necessarily something we're looking to change. And we thought this would be cleaner to just keep it to the way it was before the inadvertent apparent change, rather than getting into the debating the uses. Lastly, this is just a sort of a standard operating procedure. This Congdon Way is being proposed to be accepted. It was proposed and approved by the planning board with the intention of being accepted by the town. That's the standard way subdivisions work. It was built to all the standards of the town, and it let me put a little map there. So just to show you, the map's not showing up so well, but Stop and Shop is down at the bottom for reference. And this is up off North Strait, off Lawton Lane. This is a standard procedure. We've been doing inspections throughout. And then Chris Gallagher will give us a final recommendation at town meeting as to whether all the final punch list items were done, such as street sweeping and making sure the catch basins are cleaned out. We do that at the very last minute, so to make sure the town's getting, a quote unquote perfect road up to the last minute. But the planning board is supportive of this and has actually put this article on the warrant. So we are suggesting that you approve this. And that was my whip through of my articles, and I'm glad to entertain questions. as needed.
Hey, Paige, why is only half the Doolittle home in the historic district?
I believe that's because the half that's not in it is the newer section. And it was a deliberate decision made at some point, because that was one of the ways we realized we were doing a map. Well, as we were vetting the new map, one of the versions that came through showed all of the Doolittle, and that was just a GIS error. So that was brought to our attention, and we went back to that way. So I wasn't around then, but I think it's because it's the newer section, not the historic.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
I actually noted that same thing. I didn't know you could actually cut a building in half. Is there actually a divider in that building from the new to the old that is separate?
I'm not certain. Again, this is how it is now. I don't really know.
So our bylaws don't have anything also to preclude us splitting a building in two to make part of it historical and have part of it not.
I don't think so. I mean,
All right.
obviously we got it through before. We've had it this way, so
Okay, secondarily on the Article 22, the floodplain.
yes.
I know in my discussions with Chris talking about the dam project on West Street, that may affect the floodplain in that area. Will this have to be redone again after that project is done? Or is this already taking that into account that if GIS has done anything in regards to that?
Well, I don't think it will change this bylaw itself.
Okay.
What it could do, I guess, someday is if FEMA or whomever does these flood elevation maps, perhaps if that changed, they would figure that out and change it. But I'm not. Oh, here's Chris. Thank goodness. I'm winging it here.
I'm still listening.
Oh, good.
So what they do is every 10 years or so, the federal government actually comes out with revised plans. They're called firm plans. And that's when people get an opportunity to look at the maps. They send them to every town that's affected by it. And we're all able to take a look at them, see if we agree with them. If we don't, we're able to send in revisions. The project on West Street will have minimal impacts on that. Nothing that would affect this bylaw. It's really would be the maps that are attached to the bylaw, which come from the federal government every, like I said, every 10 years or so.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Question?
Sorry,
Wait,
go ahead.
Who did you say?
Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead, Jack.
I have a question on the floodplain article. In the section on requirements, a developer is required to provide base flood elevation data for subdivision proposals greater than 50 lots or 5 acres. Do we have examples in town where you've got 50 lots on less than 5 acres today?
I don't think so.
It struck me when I read this that 50 lots should probably be 20 or something like that, because if you look at why these are there, you go to the first part and it talks about the purpose, and it's things like eliminate new hazards for emergency response officials, and it's one of 6 things there. It's not clear to me that we should stick with the 50. That might be appropriate for Boston or Cambridge. It's not necessarily true for here, and it should be a smaller number, maybe.
Honestly, Jack, I don't think we should mess around with it. I mean, I do think if you look specifically, it talks about within unnumbered A zone. So that's a very specific area that maybe Chris can elaborate on what that even means. But I think that's bad. I think that's a floodplain. I guess we could ask. I just feel very hesitant to tinker with a bylaw that's been pretty much, been reviewed 10 times over by the state. I mean, and I also know that anything in a floodplain and all our engineering reviews for a subdivision of any size, we look at this. We look at flood data, and we don't allow development in floodplain and whatnot. So I would just say that I don't think it has as many teeth as you think it might have for this one provision. I think whenever a subdivision is reviewed, like I say, whether it's 5 lots or 2 lots, we look at the drainage and we look at the elevations. And Chris, I don't know if you can elaborate better, but.
No, I agree with you on that page. They're not allowed to build in the floodplain. The big thing is that they're showing the floodplain on the plan. They're showing what those levels are, what the elevation of that floodplain is. And then, they actually take the firm map and overlay it onto the design plans to confirm that whether it's roadway, whether it's a house foundation, whatever it happens to be, is outside of that floodplain. I've only seen it happen once, that somebody overstepped and overreached the side yard in the subdivision in one lot. And they were made to do floodplain compensation in place of that, because they'd already put the foundation in the ground and the house is up going vertical. And that's, almost 20 years. Everything else is usually caught up front. The big thing with this bylaw, and I spent some time with it as well as Lance, the town engineer, is the process of the town. So when a permit comes in, this bylaw is really talking about who gets notified, how do they get notified, and really it's the record keeping afterwards to make sure that everybody who is supposed to see these plans that are close to the floodplain or that meet this bylaw are seeing that plan and are having a chance to review the documents.
I think the purpose of this clause is to require the developer to show that with elevation data that they're not in the floodplain zone. So that's just the reverse.
I can certainly ask Joy at the state whether, there's any harm in lowering these numbers. I just don't understand fully what the implications would be to doing that. So that's why I'm hesitant to say it's not a big deal, just in case it is.
Jack, do you have any further questions on 22?
No, that was the major one that I had, because when I read through it, and I have to tell you, it's not really wonderful reading. I don't know how much time you spent on it, but it's in general, it's needed. But I'm looking at it, and as I read it, I quickly recognized that was just a slightly modified version of a model bylaw that the state had put out. So it didn't, by the time I was in the second page, I could see that. But then as I read through it, that one section was what attracted my attention. Other than that, I don't see a problem with it.
Okay, thank you. Dennis, you go ahead, Dennis.
All right. Yeah, Paige, on the Baker Historical District, I was just curious, are there any special requirements or advantages to people that reside in that district?
Well, they get the benefit of knowing that the homes around them won't change, materially. I think it's probably your perspective. I think some people probably love living in a historic district, and some people probably would prefer not. So I think it's a personal preference, but there are some restrictions. I've read the bylaw a bit. I'm not, I don't work with it a lot, so I'm not overly familiar, but I think it has some protections, but it's not the most stringent in the state. So it's kind of middle ground. But, I did walk down Baker Street today, and I could tell you that the homes are quite lovely in that district. So it looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite walking places. So I was just curious. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we're done with Article 22. Any questions on Article 23? Brett, that's your article. Do you have any questions?
No, I do not. I'm following. If I come up with something, I'm sure I could reach out to Paige, but thank you.
Okay. Article 24, Tom, are you all set? You're still on mute, Tom.
Yep,
Okay.
I'm off. No, it's just basic housekeeping, as she said. We're trying to revert it back to where you should be. So there's no
Okay.
questions about that.
Article 25, that's a hard one, Brad. Do you have any questions?
I do not again. If there's any questions, I'll reach out to Paige.
I'm just kidding on the hard part.
That's Clark's neighborhood.
All right.
That's Clark's neighborhood.
Okay, Paige, I think
Thank
we're
you.
all set for now.
Good. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Okay, next on the agenda is Article 26. That's a citizen's petition. Shelby, are you on? You know what? I don't see her, so we might just move on. Hey, John Mahoney.
Well, can we do a quick discussion here, Larry? Because I actually
Yes.
have a few questions I think should be probably broadcast to the broader audience.
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
specifically while I have Bill Keegan available. I as reading through Article 26, the first question I have is, oh, I think that's Shelby, isn't it? There she is. All right, I'll let her go then.
All right, hold on.
No reason to ask my questions twice.
I will wait. Hi, Shelby. Welcome to AdCom. I believe you're the citizen petitioner for Article 26. So can you introduce yourself to AdCom and then the floor is yours.
I think she's still connecting to audio. We
Yeah,
might,
I think
might
yeah,
have to
well,
wait a second.
yeah, I saw that thing moving around. So. Hey, John Mahoney. Quick
Yeah, hi,
question for you.
Yes.
Were you able to, did you vote on the minutes? Or
I tuned in at 7:05, so I missed the minutes.
so you
but
missed
I
it? That's fine. So that's not a big deal. So you and Bernard are both members that abstain. That's fine.
Yep, that's correct, Larry.
Okay. Now Shelby is still trying to connect, so we'll wait.
She might need to hit a button if she can hear us.
I think she's not. Shelby, if you can hear us, you can take off mute.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. Hi, Shelby. Well, welcome to AdCom. I believe you are here to talk about Article 26. So before you start, can you introduce yourself to AdCom?
Yes. I'm sorry. If you can just give me 1 minute.
Absolutely.
I
Take
do
your time.
apologize.
Take your time. We are ahead of schedule, so go ahead. Take your time.
I actually had another meeting playing in the background and I didn't understand why I was hearing a different meeting. So I do
Okay.
apologize for that. So good evening, everybody. My name is Shelby Kornbluth. I have been working with a group of other Foxborough residents to propose a warrant for the town meeting this year. And the purpose of our warrant is for a change in the capital improvement process, the way that gets funded. And so I'll just kind of, I'll give you a little bit of a background and then I'll go into the changes that we want. So right now, the CIP committee, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, is a committee that consists of the town manager, the school superintendent, a member of the Board of Selectmen, and a member of the advisory committee. And then there's one other member, and from the bylaws, sometimes it's difficult to understand who that is, whether it's the director of public works, the head of water and sewer, but right now it's the director of public works. And so so a group of us got together and we're looking at how that is done today. And we realized that the director of public works, the town manager, and the school superintendent all proposed the budgets for capital improvements. And we thought that it was a slight conflict of interest to have the people who are proposing these budgets to be the ones who are making the recommendations for the budgets to the advisory committee and to eventually the town meeting. And so we thought that it would be better if it were all residents or voting residents in the town of Foxborough who would be part of this committee. And I think that this committee traditionally has been, especially this year, has been fairly fiscally responsible, but we never know what's going to happen in the future. And we really just want to protect ourselves going forward in the future to make sure that the actual residents of the town of Foxborough are the ones who are making the recommendations to the Board of Selectmen and to AdCom and eventually to the all of the voters in Foxborough at town meeting, and to get that good representation during that process. And like I said, it seems to have been working in the past, and we're not saying that it's not working today. What we're saying is that we just want to protect our future. We want to make sure that that committee maintains its fiscal responsibility and is really making recommendations that the voters in the town of Foxborough want. The last thing I'm going to say about that is, typically when what comes out of that committee from my observations for the past couple of years, and I have to be fully transparent with you all, when my kids were young, I really was not involved. I was not paying attention. But now that my kids are in middle school and high school, I have more time on my hands, so I am able to pay attention. And now that I'm paying attention to all of these things, it's become I'm paying more attention, and we just want to make sure that it's going forward. But like I said, now that I'm paying attention to these things, we realize that what this committee recommends is typically what is agreed upon when it goes forward to advisory committee and as well as the town meeting. So I know that in the past there have been some challenges to that, but for the most part, I think that overall most people vote yes as to whatever this committee recommends. So we're just trying to make sure that that committee is fully representative of town residents and taxpayers, so that they can so that we can get the best recommendations for the town going forward.
Dan, do you want to ask your questions before I do?
Yeah, please. They're a little different than the ones that
Go
you
ahead.
asked.
Go
Shelby
ahead. Ask
in
your
the email.
questions. Yeah. Go
Okay,
ahead.
cool. So just first question, Shelby. I am making a big assumption here, but did somebody help you write this article?
Yeah, there were a couple of us involved.
Okay. All right. Was anyone involved in the town, not Foxborough necessarily, but any laws related to the town? Was anybody a lawyer? I guess my question is,
No.
there are some things I really like, and there are some things that I kind of look at and they give me pause. Like, so for example, I like the fact that you'd be recommending a capital improvement, program for the following 5 years. So that would be helpful in terms of, we want to buy, 3 police cars this year, 2 the next year, 2 the next year. Setting that up, I think that's good. But one thing I noticed was no appropriation shall be voted for a capital improvement requested by an officer, department, board, committee, or commission at any town meeting, unless the proposed capital improvement is first submitted to, reviewed by, and voted by the committee. I'm not sure, and I want to talk to Bill about this. I'm not sure you can do that. I'm not sure you can prohibit town voters from voting on something at town meeting. You see what I'm saying?
Right. So I think, Bill probably knows more about that because he knows the workings of the town. But the intent of that was to make sure that everything did get submitted in the budget process at town, in the planning process. This is a warrant, and just as like any warrant had to be submitted by February 15th, it had to go through the process. So it's really just the same thing. It has to go through the proper channels before someone can just say, hey, we want to, we want this new thing in town.
Right. And I'm not disagreeing with the thought behind it. I'm just not sure legally you can prohibit town voters from proposing something at town meeting. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
I'm thinking that maybe you want to have somebody review this that has a little background in this, just to make sure we don't put ourselves in a position where, we're not voting on this closer to town meeting because, oh, well, you can't do that. I think you have plenty of time to make sure that this is put together correctly. And I just want to make that recommendation now because, again, I'm not sure you can. So
Mr.
that would.
Chairman, I think I can
Go
address
ahead,
that question
Bill.
for
Thank you,
Dan.
please.
So good evening, everyone, and good to see you again, Shelby. So this is with respect to the question, Dan, the current actually version of the language of the bylaw says it has the same identical language. So that's not a change to the language that's being proposed. And the reason that language is included is so that the committee itself has the ability to at least evaluate and vet the need of the item before and determine if in fact there's an ability to pay for it prior to it being submitted to the legislative body, which in fact is town
Okay,
meeting.
so that's in the current language for the CIP.
That's exactly right. So that's not a change.
All right.
So just and it is viable to do it that way, and in fact, it's recommended that you do it that way, so that you don't end up with items coming before town meeting that have not been considered or evaluated for first, whether or not it's a viable thing to purchase or whether it and the need is appropriate, and three is whether the town can afford it.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, Shelby, you don't have to research that one. All right. So I only had one other thing that kind of caught my. Well, it's two other things, but one's just a nitpicky thing, and but the other one is you have in here all members shall comply with the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 268A, Conflict of Interest Law. But my understanding is that if this article passes the way you propose, you wouldn't necessarily need that statement in there, right? I mean, that statement might be necessary if, whatever. I'm not pushing any agenda, but I did know that the Board of Selectmen proposed an alternate where it's kind of a hybrid of both your ideas. Then that sentence might fit in there a little more aptly, I would say. But if this gets accepted the way you propose, there shouldn't be any conflict of interest because there will be no one holding any part-time or full-time work in the town, right?
So there actually could be somebody that does have part-time or full-time work in the town if they are recommended to the board. They could be.
But Shelby, if I read correctly, the article, it says those 5 members are not allowed to work for the town. So are you saying you're amending the position?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Okay, when I was looking at the article, I believe it said the 5 people appointed by the Water, Sewer, Board of Selectmen, etc.
No member shall hold any other full-time or part-time office or employment in the town government. I guess, look, again, it's a nitpicky thing, just something to think about. Again, I don't think that it's not a necessary statement if we go in a different direction. I do think it's a little unnecessary if no one on the committee can hold a town office or employment, then there shouldn't be any conflict of interest regardless. I guess is my point.
Right.
Can I just speak to that because I think there's a that's being usually used as a conflict of interest, and the term conflict of interest is a very specific law that speaks to the reasons why, that things, just because you hold a position in town doesn't mean you have a conflict of interest. You have to have a vested financial interest in the issue itself. So in other words, I could say if somebody was going to buy something that was going to be directly for the personal use of an individual, yes, I would say that's a conflict of interest. Or if in fact there is something that's approved to tell me that affects the personal wealth of an individual, that's a conflict of interest. These items, first of all, are not put forth by the town manager or the school superintendent, contrary to what some people may think. They're only recommended to, in fact, I don't think I put anything forward in I think the only project I ever put forward was the town hall. And so beyond that was obviously for the town, it wasn't for me. So that's not a conflict of interest. So I think the issue, you have to be careful about the use of that term because that's a specific term of law that's really well defined. And if you don't fit in that, it's really not a conflict of interest. So anything that the committee does is not really a conflict of interest that I've seen, and since I've actually taken the training, et cetera. So I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Okay. So one final question I have, and this is kind of, I guess, for Larry, really. The member of the school committee who technically proposes their budget, is that the same member that sits on the CIP committee?
So,
Well,
okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bill. You can answer.
Yeah. So can you say it one more time, Dan? I didn't catch all of that.
So, is the person who proposes the budget for the school budget, is that the same person that sits on the CIP committee? So, for example, I speak to Bill Yukno when we did the process, but is he actually the person who proposes the school budget, or is that the school committee who votes on it?
Yeah, ultimately. So what happens is that Bill and Amy work on the budget, just as I do, and George work on the budget for the town, and we present it to the selectmen. Ultimately, the selectmen are the ones that recommend the budget to you all for consideration, and ultimately for the in your action at town meeting. So I think what has to be clarified is that the committee that the CIP committee only vets the information as is brought forward by individual departments looking for approval and funding. It then gets, and I heard Shelby heard this the other night, so I'm sorry to repeat this to you,
That's
but
okay.
it's important for the committee to hear this.
Mhm.
Is that it does get vetted, it gets recommended, and you're going to see that recommendation come forward next week to the Board of Selectmen because I'm obligated under the town charter to present a CIP plan, including a 5-year plan. So that's already in there. So the recommendation, however, comes out of the committee, because that's a better way of doing it than just me recommending it individually. So and the charter says that I'm obligated to do it, but there's also the bylaw that says that we should actually have a committee to do it. And so they've sort of been melded together over the years. And so I don't think, I'm fine with that, because I think more 5 heads are better than one in terms of trying to present something forward to a committee. It gets submitted to the committee, it gets reviewed at CIP, then gets submitted to the selectmen, then it gets submitted to the AdCom, and then ultimately the town meeting is the body that votes on these things. Now, it is true, it is absolutely true that there aren't a lot of things that get changed in the plan once it's submitted to town meeting, and there's a reason for that, because that's the reason why your committee is in place, meaning the advisory committee, and that's why the elected Board of Selectmen is in place to help make those decisions for the community and to help them in trying to vet those things before they get before the legislative body. So there's a process for that, and that's why it's laid out the way it is. My role is actually very limited, as it is right now. It's just to help coordinate the meeting as we did this last Saturday, and to actually and to try and find a way to present items that are affordable and responsible, and I appreciate Shelby making that point. We all want to be responsible. That's what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And I think what's happening here is that we have done that. I think there's been and I heard this recently, that there was maybe a need for more resident participation on the committee. I don't think anybody objects to that. I think the concern is that throwing the baby out with the bathwater in this case, and that the process that we have now in place does work really well, because all the people on that committee know how the town operates, and they also know what the true needs of the community are, as opposed to having 5 people who will come in once a year and look at those situations and not know how they truly operate. So that's the challenge, and that's really the way it has worked well. And quite honestly, it's worked well. I think the reason why I think everybody's sort of a little bit of a head scratcher for us is that what's the problem with the system and how it's working? Nobody's pointed that out to me yet, and I haven't heard it from anyone. What's broken with the system? Why break a system that's already working really well? And so I think that's the question, and just I'll stop there. Those are just the points that I think have been raised to me, at least what I've heard from people.
Thank you, Bill. I guess I kind of misstated my question then. I guess where I was going with that was, you know, if say, for example, the school committee was the one proposing the budget, right? Then, you know, Bill Yukna could still be on the committee. I guess what I was getting at was the language there. I'm not sure if it covers what the perceived, not conflict of interest, but, you know, along those lines would be. So for example, you know, the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners are appointing one member. You know, I was more speaking to Shelby's point of, you know, ensuring that there's that kind of separation of church and state. So I guess, you know.
And just to follow up on that, so I think that just to be perfectly clear, especially this year, the town has been fiscally responsible. You know, I started watching these meetings last year. I watched them all this year. I think that this year they were much more they were very fiscally responsible. And so I do want to say that did happen. However, the super schools and the finance director for the schools work together to put that budget together, and then the superintendent of schools is a voting member. But it ultimately, the finance person ultimately works for the school department. It is her budget. It is the superintendent's budget. So she is putting that forward. The same thing with the Department of Public Works, right? The Department of Public Works is putting together a budget, but ultimately everyone for the town reports up into Bill. So it's still ultimately his, you know, Bill's overall budget. And I know that I know that we go to town meeting, and I understand that we vote on this at town meeting, but the people at town meeting are relying on our recommendations. And so we just want to make sure that the recommendations that are being put forward are being put forward by the members of the town. You know, if there is an issue with the people of the town who would be on this committee not fully understanding what's a priority for the town, that's up to the departments in the town. That's their responsibility to let us know what's important and what's not important, you know, and that's their job. You know, they need to let us know so that this committee can go forward and make those recommendations going forward, because, you know, it doesn't happen every year, but many, many, many times we go to town meeting and everyone just agrees with the recommendations. I know 2 years ago that was not the case, but other than that, it seems to have been the case. So we really want to make sure that it's done with the town in mind. I'm sorry.
If I may add, I generally I support every citizen's right to bring any article you want to the town meeting. Looking at this article, my concern is that, you know, I hear what you're saying. I know Bill clarified the conflict of interest, but let's just use the word conflict. Your concern about conflict of interest. If you let the school committee and the water and sewer board appoint a person to represent them, that person, he or she, is still gonna, you know, pretty much advocating for the school committee and the water and the Department of Public Works. So all I'm saying is that the people appointed by the respective appointing committee, whatever you want to call it, they are going to represent the interests of that area. So that's no different than anybody else advocating for their own position. So that's my concern right now. And my second concern is that I see what you're saying. You know, right now, you know, we have two. Basically 3 town employees work on the committee out of 5. Are you open to, you know, maybe adding more town voters to the committee, that people that do not work for the town? Keep the existing structure, add more people to it.
So I think having the people who work for the town as part of the process is critically important, right?
Agreed.
They, the Department of Public Works, they know what equipment is broken. They understand what equipment is in for service more than others, and what's a higher need. And they were able to do that even on Saturday. They were able to express their concerns when somebody wanted one thing over another. they said, oh, well, this is actually more important to me. So because it will help us, more in the shorter term. And so those types of things are very important. But I think that overall, it's still up to the residents of the town to be making those recommendations, going forward. And so I think that just adding 2 more members to a committee, to a 5-person committee, may not be the ultimate solution. So, I can go back and talk to the rest of my group. I have had a couple of conversations with people, but I have not been able to get to everybody to talk to them about this. But I think that if there are, I just think that if you're working for the town and you're voting on your own budget, to me, it just seems counterintuitive. I've never been able to vote for my budget. I mean, that's not what happens. That's not what happens in the real world. And it's, everybody, I mean, the way I understand my budget process, and you ask for everything, you hope for everything, you fight for everything you can get, and that's kind of the way it is. And people do make compromises to do what's best overall. But I still think you could always have some people that come in and really want to who really aren't interested in that. I don't think that's like that right now, but I think it could be. Things always change.
Shelby, I want to make a statement, and then I know that a lot of people waiting to ask questions. So I see you, Dennis. I see you, Jack. Shelby, I know what you're saying, but this is my take. If the school people appointed by the school committee and the water department are gonna vote pretty much for what those to represent those areas, and then the second comment I want to make is that if this article is passed, the town needs to go and find 5 willing and able citizens to serve on this committee. You may have some people that are willing to serve, but they might not understand everything else because it's fairly complex. It can be, or you can have someone who is able to do it but not willing to serve. So I just want to put it out there that I understand what you're doing, and believe me, you have some valid points. You have some good points. I'm just asking the questions from a logistic point of view. How feasible is it? And my question to you was seriously to, would it work if we add a few more people to it? But I've heard your response, so I'm going to hand it off to Jack. Jack, go ahead and ask the question.
We will at the annual town meeting in Article 4 present to the voters the input from also 24 departments, perhaps $75 million, all prepared by people who work for the town, vetted by several groups, the town manager who also works for the town, the advisory committee who do not, the board of selectmen who are elected, the school committee who are elected. And by the way, the school committee's budget is not under Bill's formal authority. They have significant independence. Not that matters, but I'm looking at the current process. If we are dissatisfied with the capital budget being proposed by initiated and formulated by employees, that's $75 million, and the capital budget is a small thing in comparison. It's effectively another department.
Right, and so we're not saying that we're dissatisfied with the budgets that are being proposed, but the expense side of the budget, this group painstakingly goes through that, and you go through an excruciating detail, get that information, and then your group makes a recommendation. The CIP, that detail of that review is done by the CIP committee, and then it gets presented to you. And I will fully admit, I have not seen how it gets presented to you, but I can't imagine that you're going to do another 5-hour meeting like there was this, or 4-hour meeting like there was this past weekend, going through every single line item of that budget. So my point is that your group really goes through the expense budget line by line by line. And we all know that the biggest part of that budget is really salaries and contracts and things like that. This other group, the CIP, is going through that, but is going through the proposal line by line by line to make that recommendation. So I actually think of it as really the AdCom for capital. It's a much smaller scale considering the size of the budget, but that's how I really see this.
We, by the way, have seen the proposed items that are on the capital budget that are proposed for the Capital Improvement Committee. We have only one vote on weeding down the total list down to what the committee actually proposes.
And you guys do so much as it is. I can't imagine you having, like, all of you having to go through that detail on the capital budget. I understand that you've seen it, but then you see what gets recommended at the end, right?
Well, okay, I'll take a step back. We saw the initial request. That's about whatever $5 million, what Jack is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The CIP committee last Saturday voted, and I don't want to go in details, but roughly it was cut free cash down to 650,000. So the rest, I'm not counting the one paid by ambulance receipts or Chapter 90, but strictly on free cash, it was down to 650,000.
But I believe the 5 million was everything. The original
Correct,
5 million
correct.
was everything. Yes.
Correct. I believe if you put in the ambulance and the Chapter 90, it's maybe about 2.5 million. Don't, if I'm wrong, Bill, jump in. But so it's been cut by half, Jack. I just didn't want to present it because it has to go to the Board of Selectmen, and then it'll come to AdCom next week.
The budget being recommended, and you'll see it next Tuesday, so there's no surprise here, is $1.5 million.
Yeah.
That includes Chapter 90, includes the 650,000 of free cash to be used for really critical needs at this point. And then the other, because we took a very, very conservative approach this year, given the fact that we know that, things are lean, but, the town still has to operate. And I think that's the reason why we took the steps that we did.
And I think also it doesn't include the state funding for the West Street
It does.
project.
That 1.5 does include the 650,000, which is the Chapter 90 money, which by the way, $208,000 of that has to come out of Chapter 90 to pay for the 708,000 plus the 708,000.
Right, but I think the original 5 million included the 708,000.
That's correct. That is correct. And that money is already a grant that we brought.
Yep. No, I just wanted to make that point. That's all.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
Hey, Larry.
That is, go ahead. I'll go to Brian.
Yeah. So, to me, I've worked in the public sector and the private sector, and this is not in any way an unusual process. Department heads submit their capital requests. It has to go to a committee who prioritize those requests. And a lot of times the people on the committee are part of the organization, and they've been appointed to this committee. And their job is actually to prioritize and make the tough decisions. And there will be people on that committee that really are advocating for things for their area of responsibility or their department. But their advocacy has to pass muster with the rest of the committee members. So at the end of the day, everyone has to give a little ground, and you end up with a really good capital committee list that then goes to the selectmen, then goes to the advisory committee. In terms of conflict of interest, the only time a conflict of interest comes into play in that kind of a process is if someone personally on that committee benefits from something that's before the committee. That person has to declare their conflict, and they may not have to be recused from the vote and recused from the meeting. So that's where the personal conflict of interest comes in. In my experience, public-private, that's generally how it works, and it works well typically.
So just a follow-up statement on the conflict of interest. I understand that there are very specific conflict of interest laws. I'm not specifically talking about people who have a conflict of interest as defined by the laws or like that. It's more that, you know, any department is going to want to prioritize their items over another department because it's things that they specifically need. And there is a conflict there. And now, you know, I thought that this weekend's process ran well, but like I said, it's running well now. You never know what's going to happen in the future. You never know if you get a bad egg in there, right? And so we're just really trying to protect that. And so, you know, there are sometimes you might get somebody in there who's going to want to convince everybody that their piece of capital is the most important thing, when in reality, other things are a higher priority. And so we're just trying to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Mr.
Well,
Chairman,
there's a lot of checks
go
and balances built into that not happening, but I've already said what I had to say.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just in regards to that last, probably the best example of that, of the checks and balances and how that works, is that the police chief, I think, put forward a third or fourth cruiser a couple of years ago, and that made it through the capital process, made it through the selectmen's recommendation, and then made it to the AdCom. And I think there was the AdCom decided it was not something that they wanted to recommend at the time. So and that's the recommendation that went forward to town meeting. And so then it was defeated. The chief still made his case before the committee, and then later on it was added because, you know, it turned out that the need was still there. So I think the reality is that even though people do advocate, and really the way it's designed the way it is because the people that sit on the committee are the most knowledgeable. I think Dennis pointed this out, are the most knowledgeable about the needs of the operations per se, and that's the reason why they serve in that capacity. But again, it's only a recommendation, not a final decision with regards to how things are actually decided. Chris Gallagher probably gave away most of his stuff on Saturday. He didn't. I don't think he got anything, or virtually anything, other than what they came out of the state aid. So I mean, so even though he served on the committee, he advocated for everything he could try and get. But at the end of the day, he didn't get a lot out of that. So I just think it's important to really note those things for everyone to hear. So, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's okay. Brian, do you have any questions, Brian?
Yeah, Larry. So Shelby, I think there's a lot of merit to the article, specifically the annual report and some of the additional language, which I think was put in here. I think so. What I'm seeing here, though, is there's a lot of complexity in the article, and I think Dan will work on writing up and summarizing it so that it won't be as complex for the voters. My experience in town meeting is articles that are this long really confuse the voting public, right? So that's just a comment. And then I wanted to ask Bill. You know, Bill, is there any reason why having additional representation from the town on the committee would prevent us from doing town business? Like I'm trying to get, I've heard a lot of debate here on this article tonight, but I'm trying to get to what happens if we do this. Does it affect anything materially?
Probably the answer is if you add a couple members, add a couple of residents to the committee, I don't think anybody would object to that. Okay. I think the issue is disassembling the entire process and putting just residents on the committee who don't have any, you know, day-to-day knowledge of the operation, so they can then recommend stuff, you know, knowledgeably recommend things to everyone else for consideration and for expenditure. I think the reason why they put the town manager on the committee is because ultimately I'm in charge of the finances for the town. The school committee's on it because it's the biggest segment of the entire town's budget. So clearly is responsible for the biggest segment of employees as well. And so there's reason for that. And I think it's important to have those people participate in that process. And by the way, I meant to mention this earlier. I'm required by the town's charter to submit the plan. I'm required to. Not anyone else in the town is required to but me. It says right in the charter that I'm required to submit one annually to the Board of Selectmen. So irrespective of the process that we have, irrespective of the bylaw that's being proposed, I still have to submit a plan. So I think the process that's being proposed, if you didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But I think the problem, the way it's set up now, it does work. But I certainly would welcome, input from residents, so we don't, so there isn't any kind of concerns about I think what Shelby's trying to get to, and I appreciate her concern. I'm not. This is good debate. I don't have any concern about having these kind of conversations because it's not personal. It's just that I'm trying to advocate for how I see the process currently working.
And I see, I'm sorry, Larry and Dan. I just wanted to make one correction. A member of the school committee is not currently on the CIP. It's the superintendent who's on the CIP.
Correct.
That's
correct.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make that one clarification.
No, you're absolutely right.
Okay. So I just have a quick question, Mike, kind of for the group, but more towards Bill. What's best case and worst case here? So best case is that the group operates, the newly formed committee operates exactly the same as the old one. There's no issues with moving capital projects through the committee, right? So what's the worst case here? That nothing gets moved? I kind of find that hard to believe, right? That things come to a standstill because the new members don't understand what needs to happen. I'm trying to weigh this out in a way that makes sense, right? So what would be the worst case here?
Oh, it's a fair question. So I think that the only response I can provide to you is that is what I've said repeatedly, is that the people that serve in the committee are the most knowledgeable about the requests that are coming forward. And so if you put 5 individuals in the committee that don't have any involvement in town government on a day-to-day basis and ultimately show up, once, and this meeting only occurs once a year, sometimes twice, depending upon the situation, you're going to be in a position where they're going to have to get up to speed as to why the presentation is going to take longer. There's going to be a lot more, I would say, misunderstanding of how things actually work because they're not involved in it on a day-to-day basis. And it could actually drag the process out to the point, and things could get recommended. Shouldn't be recommended because for operational purposes. I think what's unclear to me is why this is really coming forward, because it doesn't make any sense to me. So far, nobody's identified a single instance where the capital process hasn't worked. I've yet to see one. Nobody's made a recommendation. Nobody's identified one. So I'm not sure why this is being proposed, other than the fact that I've heard that the town manager doesn't live in town and the school superintendent doesn't live in town, but the other 3 people do. And by the way, we're hired professionals, so our job is to make sure that the town runs as well as we possibly can run it for the benefit of the community. And we're hired by the elected officials of the town for that purpose. So.
Shelby,
oh, sorry.
Shelby, I just want to say, I'm like I said, I support what you're doing. I'm just not sold right now to completely change the structure. I can definitely see adding 2 more town voters to the committee to make, it's probably not the right term, but maybe to even the odds. I don't mean it in a bad way, but to completely dismantle the committee right now, I just don't see a need for it at this point in time.
Right. So just so everyone's clear, the intent is not to dismantle the committee. The intent is to take a couple of voting members and make them part of the committee, but non-voting members, and replace and then add 2 additional townspeople from voting members.
Agreed.
And so then the other thing is that, so it's not adding 5 people who don't know anything about this. 3 people are already on there who know about it. Or right now there's already somebody from AdCom on there. There's already someone from the Board of Selectmen on there. And this is adding a member of the school committee on there. So those 3 people automatically understand more or are more educated about the process and more educated about what's going on in town. And then you add 2 other members. I mean, personally, if there were more people from AdCom, I think that'd be great, because I think all of you have a really good understanding of what's going on. But that's a huge commitment for all of you. You already make such a big commitment as it is. So I don't think it's fair to ask that. But I think that it's in everyone's talking about things haven't gone, there's nothing wrong with the process, but we've had instances in the past where things have kind of gone awry a little bit, and we just want to protect ourselves for the future. And, times right now, things are really tight for people. A lot of people, town revenue is down, everyone else's revenue is down. And I think that people are just really concerned that if things continue to trend this way, to make sure that we have a little bit more control over the process.
Jack?
Yeah, one of the lines in the proposal struck me. If I look at the advisory committee, what we are required to do, every article that comes before town meeting, we are required to vote and submit a recommendation to the town meeting. The proposal for a capital improvement committee, if I read this correctly, if an organization within the town makes a proposal, they can make the proposal to this new CIP. If the CIP chooses not to vote on it, but just to ignore it, then it's automatically blocked. And somehow that needs to be
right, Jack. That's what I was trying to get to. You're right, and I'm not saying it's not wrong. I'm just saying I don't think it's written right for that.
So just to be abundantly clear, this article is taken word for word from what's already in place today, with the exception of who the members are. Everything else is in the existing bylaws today. So that is already in the existing bylaws.
Sorry, but that's not accurate. It's not accurate to say that, because it's not written that way. There are other changes, and I think the term conflict of interest was included in there. That's not in there. If you read the actual bylaw right now,
it's just the first paragraph, Bill. That first paragraph is new.
Okay, so my point to you is that process was designed to change it a couple of years ago, and the same arguments that were being discussed then are being discussed now. What's the issue with the current system? And you made a statement a few minutes ago. You said there were problems identified. I've been here for 7 or 8 years now. I've not seen one yet where it's been identified as a problem. So I'm not sure where those problems have been identified.
Bill, I think we brought this up at the last town. I don't know if it was with the last town meeting, if it was in a conversation I had with one of the Board of Selectmen. So I do apologize. But prior to you getting here, things kind of I don't think people were very happy with how things were working prior to your arrival for that a couple year period there. And
thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
Sure, but that piece would be up for town interpretation anyway, right? So I mean, if this were to get to town meeting and get a vote, then people can decide how they feel about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, one question on my side. Let's say that we were able to look at the past 5 years into the process, meaning we look at every department's original request for CIP, how it was reviewed, but more importantly, the gap between what was requested by department and the outcome. Meaning, let's say, for example, department requested, I'll just give a number, $200,000 worth of CIP submitted of what they would need. Understand how it was reviewed, not so much who voted for what, but let's say that we ended up to have 150,000, so 50,000 less. So 2 things. First, understanding if by shortening that department by 50,000, did that result in an efficiency or something wasn't done? Or if the full amount was, let's say, allocated and voted for, Was it fair? Meaning, I think like everything else, the benchmarking and understanding numbers are everything. So from every department, if we go back to the past 5 years, look at everyone, who requested how much and what was the end result, but more importantly, given the end result, what happened? I'll be more specific. Last year, the Water and Sewer Department requested $1 million of basically capital improvement. If I recall very well, it was voted favorably in less than 10 minutes at Town Hall. That was a big number. Now, we all have an appreciation of how water is important, but the point I'm trying to make, $1 million is still $1 million. Now, it was presented effectively and very well. But again, myself, I was, again, greatly appreciative of that, the fact that $1 million was approved, but it took basically less than 10 minutes to have been approved. I'll tell you, any other department who presented less than 10% of that number were scrutinized to the max. So what I'm trying to say is that I have been in outcome for a long time and I have seen it both ways. Sometimes you have a mix of, let's say, opinions in the process and judgment. And I always tend to be very careful about opinion and judgment because I'm all about data and facts. So I think that if we were to look at the past 5 years and who submitted by what, every department and the outcome in terms of how it worked or something failed, perhaps would help all of us, especially if there was something that was, let's say, voted by too much and it created a perception of, let's say, waste. So I'm not sure if I made it a bit more confusing or clearer.
So I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that was supposed to be, if that was just a comment on an activity that should happen, or if that's a question for me. I will say that I think last year's town meeting was a very different town meeting than usual. I think everything got approved in record time. I think people wanted to get in and out as fast as possible due to the situation. And quite frankly, attendance was very low last year. So I think last year was an exception. Like getting $1 million proved that quickly, I think last year was an exception. I think, Bill brought up a point about the police cruiser. I think that, in that particular instance, that did get voted down at town meeting. And I don't think there was enough data presented about that. I don't think it was scrutinized enough. I understand that the police have these cars and they're in them all the time, but these cars are far more reliable. And we didn't look at any maintenance data or repair data on the cars before we replaced them. And it got voted down. And then I said this before, and I'm going to say it again, at the fall town meeting, when it appears to be fewer people there and not as scrutinized, it got slipped in and it passed at that time. So I think that, those are the types of situations that I'm thinking about. And I mean, people can argue with me all you want. I'm really going to stand by that. I felt that when I was at that town meeting, a fast one was pulled on me, to be quite honest with you.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have anything new to ask? Okay, if not, thank you, Shelby, for coming. I'm sure if Dan has any questions, he might reach out to you.
Yeah, Dan, please do. If you have any questions or any recommendations, I would, I'd love to hear them.
Sorry, I just realized that my screen was blank. I must have hit, when I hit mute, I must have hit stop video. Yes, I'm as I'm writing mine up, I just want to make sure that I have everything correct so that when I present to the town, like Brian said, I just want to make sure it's as clear and concise as possible, that I'm not misrepresenting anything. So I will 100% be reaching out to you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Shelby.
Right. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, next on the agenda is George. George.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, George, how are you?
Good.
Okay, George, I think you have Article 6 and 7.
Okay, essentially they're two pieces of the same puzzle here. Number 6 is actually an amendment to the town's bylaws. And for the folks at home that don't know what we're talking about here, first of all, both these articles are dealing with revolving funds, which have to be set up in a legal fashion. And a revolving fund being something where the money comes in and the money goes out, mostly without appropriation. So in the case of these two pieces, okay, what we've got going here is we are adding two new revolving funds to an already existing list. So even though number 6 looks like a whole bunch, what it is it's a reiteration of what was already there plus 2 more lines. So the 2 lines that we're adding in would be the ones for the fire department, which was the public health one that they're looking to do, funds for inoculations and reimbursement of the health service. The fire chief has been using a fund. He charges people for these various shots, not all of them being for like COVID. I mean, there was other things that they were doing with it. And then he was utilizing the money, okay, or wants to utilize the money to rebuy the materials needed so he can set up another clinic, okay? The second one that we're adding is the IT technology for the school department. Essentially, bottom line on this one is that what we're doing here is the school, if you know, now all the kids are on, they're getting iPads and Chromebooks and what have you to do home learning with. The school has, like many others, been collecting a fee, okay, which would be, I'm not quite sure how much the fee is. I think it's between $25 to $50, so that in the event that there is a breakage, they have something to fall back on and get the machine fixed, or buy an insurance policy or what have you. So the 2 new ones on Article 6 are those 2, okay? So once set up in Article 6, you now have the setup moving forward forever, okay, unless you come back and remove one, and you don't have to revisit that. You do, however, on every year, which is standard procedure for these types of revolving funds. And when I say this is everywhere, not just here, so I don't want to make it sound, but when you have a revolving fund, you're essentially, each department that is using it is essentially being given the ability to spend sort of without appropriation at the town meeting, because the money sort of flows in and the money sort of flows out. So what the state provides us as a sort of self-governing feature is that every year the town meeting will go in with these, okay, and say, well, here's the spending limit on it. All right, that's okay. If you want to go out and spend the money that you're doing on each one of these things, that's okay, but I don't want you spending any more than X, okay? So if you look, you'll see the spending limits. Most of them, besides, I think they are similar to where they were last year. There might be a minor differential on one, but then you have your 2 new ones there. Okay, again the fire one and the school IT technology piece. The only thing that did come up is I got a call from Paul this afternoon, and he was saying, well, why does it say 21 and 22? And the reason for that is when we were going to set these up, they would like to spend these 2 new accounts, the money in 21. The school has some things that they want to spend this year, as does the fire chief. So initially we had set this up for a special town meeting. The town council said, don't bother, put them all on one. That way we don't have to have a double header here, and have like one open and close one and then start the other. So the fact that one says 21, 22 is really targeting the two new ones to allow for the fact that those two did not exist last year. The others did. The others were voted and were given their spending limits. The others were already existed in the bylaws. So by doing what we're doing here, the 21, 22 is recapturing for the two new ones, since they did not have any spending limits set for 21, and also providing for the new year of 22, if that gives you what you need.
George, so Article 6 is just to get the two new revolving funds in, and Article 7 is to allow them to spend $100,000 each in the year 2021.
Yes, yes, and by the way, 2022 also, you're setting.
Yes, yeah, right.
Yes.
But the reason they're separate is one is to actually incorporate the two new ones, and then 7 is to allow them to spend 100 in this year and then 100 in next.
Keep this in mind, you're not going to be seeing them actually spending that, because the money, there isn't that much money in them. It's more the spending cap is going to be more aimed for next year, because there's nowhere near that kind of money I know in the school one, and I'm not sure on the fire chief's one, but the school one isn't even a quarter of that at this particular point in 21.
Hey, George.
Yes.
Hey, Paul here. So thanks for your conversation at lunch today. I do have a question about the senior trip account.
Yes.
So I think that one went up a lot. I think when we did this last year, I think that was mine actually last year to present, it was 120, and it's up to 250. So typically these accounts follow the revenue, right? So the implication here is the revenue's way up, or what's the implication of that?
I believe in that the COA director, Mark, is anticipating, if we can ever get out of this quagmire here of this disease thing, that they're anticipating an increase in these trips moving forward.
Yep.
Again, now remember, when you said it, okay, you're saying, I'm going to allow you to go up to 250,000. Well, first of all, if there isn't 250,000 in the account, it doesn't go, okay? So what it's basically saying is that we're allowing up to this, okay? But then it's dictated, especially through the accounting office. I don't know whether a lot of people realize that, but your last, and I hate to say it like this because it sounds like we're in a war or something, but I always say your last line of defense is the departments put their things in. When it finally hit their request for expenditures, when it finally hits the accounting office, your town accountant is actually the person who will say, hey, wait a minute, you don't have that money in there. I can't allow this to go out. And that's where it finally stops. And by the way, our computer system also says, hold it, there's only $10,000 in here. You can't spend 15. Okay. So that's where it finally hits. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
So hey, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, we have a note from Marie. There is a plan to potentially put together a very large trip in the spring. And so that's the explanation for the big increase. And again, just for totally to George's point, this is essentially a spending control to make sure you have an eye on an account where revenues are coming in. And so if that's the explanation, that at least helps.
And
that's exactly right, George. If I could just interject for 1 second, through you, Mr. Chairman, and just wanted to, Paul, it's important to remember that this approval will be for July 1st through June 30th of next year. And one thing that that group did was they had a rather large trip planned right before COVID that was supposed to go to Europe, and they ended up canceling the whole thing. In fact, there was a lot of concern about getting even the return money back to people, which they ultimately did. But it's just it's just a case of they do anticipate a larger group of trips this upcoming year. So the answer to your question is effectively yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I could ask, the police and fire revolving fund of 100,000, is that for the purpose of buying new vehicles, equipping them out? What's that, the goal of that money?
No, the apparatus utilization revolving fund, yes, they can buy, I believe, most of the time we're doing capital and buying the cars and trucks with it. The revolving account, I believe, as I'm sitting here, I'm at a loss as to where the money is coming in from. Either it's the sale of old vehicles or something.
So, well, I can answer that, George, if you want, because it's this is a case where the town actually, when they do police details, they can actually rent the vehicle as well. And that money goes into that account as well. And then also, if we have a situation where we have damage to a vehicle, we can put the insurance check into that account, and then also purchase something else or help to pay for the repairs for that account.
That makes sense. Yes.
So I'm guessing part of this is we're going to give these parts of the town a certain amount of money to spend every year on their own. But if we're trying to give them a little leeway, that 100 grand doesn't go far on an ambulance, a fire truck, or police car. So
right, exactly.
Right.
Exactly, but they have to take the money in somehow, John, and they take the money and then they can use it to repair something if something breaks, without really affecting the operating budget in many ways as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Most of your income, when people bring in money, it goes to the general fund, with the exception of your two enterprise funds, and then it is redistributed at the annual town meeting, and people are making votes to say, through the budget process, we're going to spend all this money on this, and this. But in certain instances, like these revolving accounts, they're allowing you to segregate this particular set of monies and not put it into the general fund, but put it into this account and then utilize it without much without the course of actually putting it out at a town meeting.
If this gets approved, how will our reporting update? So when we're here a year from now looking at stuff, so we can tell how much they have in this fund, how much they use, and whether when they're asking for money next year that we know what they already have kind of in the till in this program.
Well, remember, like I said, we're adding 2 new, okay? But there's how many we got here? It looks like there was 5 of them already there before. At any particular point in time, if somebody was concerned about any of these funds, like, well, how much came in, how much went out, we can pull off a sheet right off the computer that says, okay, here's where all the revenues came in, and by the way, here's what everything got spent all the way up to date. So you can see what's going on with that.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, with regards to the police and fire revolving, is there any preclusion against or reservation against civil forfeiture assets going into that fund?
Say again, what forfeitures?
Is there any prohibition against civil forfeiture assets being put into that revolving account?
I mean, I guess what you're saying is if they took somebody's car, and like in a drug raid or something like that, and then sold it, would it go in there? I believe they have another whole fund just for that.
Okay.
It is it's something that is set up from town to town, okay, and it can be used for things that police departments might need if they were doing undercover sort of things, if they needed money to, like go out and purchase, like, if I was an undercover guy trying to purchase drugs and things like that.
Well, as Bill said, you have to have a place for the money to go when it comes into the coffers. And so I don't remember seeing a line item.
There is, I believe there is a drug forfeiture account somehow. Yeah, it's and it's if you have a situation where like it's drug related type of thing, they can put the money into that account. But I don't believe this account is intended for that purpose, though, Tom.
Right. It's segregated.
I don't remember seeing that as a line item in the budget either, so wasn't aware.
No,
of it.
no, it would never be budgeted.
That's what the finance department held on to that?
No, it's in an account. It's not us having it. It's segregated. This is money by law that can be segregated for an account for police use.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could keep it, but it doesn't. They don't let me.
I'm sure the lawyers don't want you to keep it.
Exactly. You know.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on Article 6? Okay, Article 7, questions? Hey, George, I think you're good.
Yes.
You're good.
Okay.
6 and 7. Okay, that brings us to the last item. Hey, Bill, are you still on?
I'm still on. Yep.
Good. I have 3 questions I want to clarify since I have you.
Sure.
I'm trying to set the schedule for next week. So the CIP budget, Article 5, is that you or George going to present to AdCom? So I can do the agenda.
I'll probably present it to you because it's my responsibility to present it.
Okay. And then Article 17, the singular wireless on top of the public safety.
Yeah. So
That's going to be...
We'll probably, myself and probably Mike Kelleher, Chief
Okay.
Kelleher will be involved in that because we collaborated on that particular issue. It's a pretty simple issue. It's not it's not that I could probably do both myself.
Okay. And then the last question is the stretch energy code, Article 20.
Yeah, that's one I'm not gonna take that one because that requires an explanation. That'll either be Page or Barry Ringler. The stretch energy code is a require since the town is looking to try and become a green community.
Yeah,
we're required by law to adopt the stretch energy code in that case. And one of the few, and believe it or not, one of the few communities left in Massachusetts that isn't a green community.
Bill, if I'm not mistaken, this was presented about 8 or 10 years ago, right? But
it may have been. It may have been. I'm not sure. I wasn't here when it was, but it's entirely possible because green communities have been around for a long time. And I actually worked on one when I was in Dedham, and we actually were one of the first ones to become a green community at that time. But and that was probably about a good 10 years ago. A good 10, maybe 12 years ago.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I'd say maybe 2012 was presented to the town meeting back then, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Things have changed a lot since then, and the stretch energy code is actually pretty commonly used by developers. I think a lot of the developers almost defer to that as their basis for building nowadays.
Okay. All right. I think I'm good. Thank you. So,
Mr. Chairman, just a brief note that we are tracking the federal legislation very closely. To see it did pass the House today, so we're waiting to see if the president will sign probably by Friday, and then we're trying to get a handle on how much it actually impacts Foxborough, and we should know something by next week. Should at least give you some indication of where that stands.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome. Good night, everyone. Do you need me for anything more, Mr. Chairman? Or
no, I think we're good. Thanks, Bill.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, that brings us to the last item, which is the election of the vice chair. I guess I think I mentioned it. The reason, or a couple of reasons, Bernard had to step down because of work. Really, his work demands. So usually, what we tend to do for the position of the vice chair is to find someone that hopefully will be back next year. So you can assume the chair position, and so we have a smooth transition from this fiscal year into next. So that's really the reason. And Bernard was, given his workload, he was willing. I think he's told me, I'm willing to step down to let somebody step in, so we have a smooth transition. So that's the reason for it. So I know 2 people already mentioned an interest in running. So at this point, I'm going to ask for someone to nominate someone. So
nominate Tom.
Who did that?
That's Brian.
Oh, okay. Any seconds?
I'll accept it. Someone
Well,
second.
we're gonna ask for a second.
I can't second myself, right?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other nominations?
Yeah, I would like to nominate Paul.
Okay. And second for Paul?
I'll second that.
I don't see that. I'm sorry, who seconded it? All right, well, it's Jack or Sharon. I think I heard Jack, so Jack, you got it. All right, so we're gonna go, those in favor, well, since Tom was the first nomination, we'll go, those in favor of Tom, raise your hand. I got one, I got two. Got three votes, okay.
Yeah, 4.
So it's John Mahoney, Brian, and Tom.
And
And
You
Dennis.
also have Dennis. Yeah, you also have Dennis. Yeah.
Okay, that's 4 people. All right, so, and those in favor of Paul? 4. Don't tell me we have a tie. 5, 6, no, I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4,
6 plus whatever you are.
6. So
So 7.
congratulations, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you. All set. So, all right. Before we end the meeting, I just want to ask the committee. Next week we have right now 4 articles to be presented to the committee. And my question is, we do have time now. We are running short of time, so I'm going to propose that we start deliberating the articles that was presented tonight. So I'm going to put in an agenda, and the easy ones, if we can approve, we'll take the vote. The harder ones, if we need more time, that's fine. So at this point, I just want to propose that we do it. And then I also want to take this opportunity to thank Bernard for helping us out over the years. Thank you, Bernard. And thank you for supporting me.
Thank you to everyone. And then, by the way, regarding our process, I think I had mentioned to Larry that at least I think this is my close to 7th year plus in outcome. And I believe very much like the corporate world that no one should be indispensable. Actually, if someone stays too long for a function, one could argue that perhaps the process or the institution itself doesn't work as well as it should. So it just so happened that from a work standpoint, actually, things are going very bright for me. So it's just also added work. And like everything else in life, I had to, talking about the balancing act, I had to juggle. And given 7+ year in outcome, and I think that it was perhaps the right time to do this transition. So Larry was correct.
Hey, Bernard, I think what you've done is amazing. And as I said in the email, we will get together for a beer or something before you're done. But I'm going to be bothering you a lot for the next 3 months. So thank you in advance for that.
No, it would be my pleasure.
Okay. Does anybody have anything you want to discuss? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Hey, Larry, just real quick.
Yeah.
Provided that there are edits to the article, how does that process work for our vote next week?
Actually, I don't know, Brian. I think if any edits, you stumped me. How's that?
Sorry,
I think the best way.
I'm just curious. Like, for example, it seems to me Article 26 is going to need some edits, right? And I'm wondering if that means that we are no longer able to vote for it if it gets modified. Okay.
Correct. If
okay.
At some point,
would we have to vote again if there are amendments made to it?
I would prefer not to. I mean, if you find out from her, or if I hear that she's going to make any edits, whatever it is, then we should hold off. I think it's no point voting on it. So my position is that if we know she's going to change whatever or not, if she's not going to change, we'll deliberate. But if she's going to change, we should give her the time. We have time to make whatever changes she wants.
Okay.
Before we do it. So if
another dimension, we may choose to propose amendments.
we can
That's
do
right,
that too.
yeah.
Yes. Agree. So I think what I'll do is we'll put all the articles on the agenda to deliberate. And then if I hear from now until next week from her, if she's going to make any changes, we'll bring it to the table. And if anybody wants to make any proposal to change, we can do that. You're right, Jack. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn then?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Second, Jack. So in favor, we'll raise your hand. I can see. Hey, Tom, you motion to adjourn. Brian, do you want to raise your hand if you are?
I got it up.
Okay. So everyone voted yes. Good night. Talk to you guys later. Good night.